Good evening, everyone. Apologies for that slight delay. We are back on track now. My name is Sinead McCrohan, and you are very welcome to our Discover Your Future in DCU series. We took a little bit of a hiatus the last 2 weeks, but we are back now, and I'm delighted to be back with such a great episode coming up, everything to do with psychology in DCU. So just before we get started, I'll draw your attention to the Q&A function that's along the bottom of the screen on your Zoom. If you want to ask our panelists anything over the next 40 minutes or so, please do let us know through the Q&A, and we'll be more than happy to find an answer for you. I'm going to introduce our panel now and welcome them in one by one to the call. I'm really excited for today. We have a lovely range of academics, of recent graduates, and also a graduate or a current student on the call as well. So hopefully we can give you a lot of different insights into potentially studying psychology in DCU. So in no particular order, I'm going to go with what I can see on my screen at the minute. I'm going to welcome Dr. Boran onto the panel, who is an assistant professor in psychology in DCU. Brian, you're very welcome. I'm going to let you guys in one by one. Next up, we have Cathal Blake, who is a recent graduate of the B.Sc in psychology in DCU and is currently pursuing his PhD in his research. So Cathal, you're very welcome. I'll promote you to a panelist now. Next up, we have Dr. Lorraine Boran, who is an assistant professor in the School of Psychology in DCU, and I'm sure she'll tell us more about the work she does as she enters the call. Hey guys, you're very welcome. And we are just waiting on our student representative, who isn't here at the minute, but if Sarah enters the call a little bit later, we'll be able to welcome her in. Hello, everyone. How are you? Can you unmute yourselves, I wonder?
Very good. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Here.
Fantastic.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you very much. That was much smoother than the previous week, so fantastic. I'm getting better at this tech. You'd think we'd be well used to Zoom at this point, but thank you very much for coming along. How's everyone keeping?
Very good.
Oh, good, yeah, thank you.
Great to hear.
Lovely and sunny.
I know, and I was about to say thank you for not only taking the time out of your regular Thursday, but on a sunny Thursday evening as well. I'm sure you're dying to get out and have a walk, and thank you very much to our participants who have come along as well to hear more about. We have a fantastic number of attendees in today, which is telling of the interest in psychology at DCU, so I'm really excited to get into it. And as I said, for anyone who's entered the call, please do let us know through our Q&A if you want to ask anything in particular. So Lorraine, I might come to you first in terms of different course options for psychology in DCU, because we probably have a lot of sixth-year students on today who think, okay, I have an interest in psychology, but I don't know which one I could potentially go into.
Sure, and good evening to everyone. I mean, we have a really strong and growing psychology portfolio. So at undergraduate level, we'll have 3 psychology programs. So our flagship one is the B.Sc in psychology. So that's 10 years strong. I think there's a party due, Brian, soon, right? 2020 was meant to be our anniversary or 10 years anniversary. So COVID kind of threw that off. But that's our 4-year B.Sc honours psychology program. So that's accredited by the Psychological Society of Ireland, so it has been reaccredited a number of times. And there's a really strong focus on all the core areas of psychology, really exciting electives. And I know, Cathal, you are a graduate of our program and can speak to it, but a number of electives that you won't see anywhere else. One of them that I can just happen to speak to is law and neuroscience. So that's where you take a little bit of the psychology of the brain and how you image the brain, and you look at how it's used in the criminal justice system. But lots of different specialisms worked into our 4-year program. I mean, our big lead is the internship program, and Cathal, I'm thinking you'd probably like to speak to that as well. And we were the first to lead out in that, in this space. So lots of other people are following what we're doing, but that internship program is in the 3rd year. So that's where you get practical experience working potentially with a hospital, with an NGO, in industry, in the community, and also in research as well. So it's competitive, you get really rich kind of practical experience. And then in the 4th year, there's a final year project. So that's independent research. And we've 2 new programs, and I'm chair of one of them. So I'm really psyched about this. It's Psychology and Disruptive Technologies. So this is kind of the interface of where psychology, so like the human first, and technology. So, when we're talking about like social robotics and artificial intelligence, where this comes together, this perfect marriage. So this degree will have elements of psychology, really technical aspects like programming and web interface and all of this, and then kind of the integration of both. And of course, we also have psychology and mathematics. So that's one of our other new degrees. So again, that's a 4-year program and a really strong focus, not only on psychology, but on these really important math skills. So we know that math modeling is really important right now, COVID. I mean, we all check the statistics. What are the models telling us? When can we actually see another person, you know? So modeling has never been so important ever. And that's what we'll be looking at, modeling human data. So those are our 3 really cool psychology programs.
Absolutely. And I love that the DCU School of Psychology is evolving. So if you did want to explore a mathematical side of things, or do pure maths modules, you can do that now along with psychology. Or if you want to focus more on the tech side of things, these are offerings that are coming down the line, which is really exciting. It shows the innovation and the growth through the university as well. Whether Lorraine or Brian want to hop in here in terms of the course structure in psychology, because I know a lot of students at career fairs will say, I'm really interested in humans, what we think, what we do. So what sort of modules would, could a 6th year at the minute look forward to studying in any psychology degree in DCU?
Yeah, Brian, okay. If you want to jump in on that, or we'll tag team.
We'll tag team on this. Okay, we'll tag team on this. And Lorraine will have more experience on this too as well. But so just to follow up, they're obviously different depending on some modules will be different depending on the degree that you take. But if you go in to take psychology, there's some core modules that you will look at. So we kind of have developmental modules. So you look at how the mind and the body develop over time, right from birth right up into older life, okay? How people interact with their environment and so on, different things like that. Then we also have what we have is cognitive psychology. So all about like memory and attention, and kind of how the brain understands information, basically. So we have kind of modules like that. We also have learning modules. So, for example, some people might have heard of kind of like conditioning. When you walk by your favorite fast food place and you get that smell and your tummy rumbles, that kind of thing. Well, that's a learned event. Okay, so you understand why that happens. So that's kind of like behavioral psychology. And they're kind of the core ones that you will do. There's lots of other ones. I'll pass over to Lorraine because there's some specialisms that she can talk about. There's lots of other ones. They're the core ones that come to my mind.
Yeah, and the core ones, what we do is we have introductory, so in the first 2 years, and then post-introductory, so you get to go advanced. So like Brian said, like on the brain, so that's a big focus, the brain and the body, and how you think all across the lifespan. Also research is a really big focus. Like at get-go, we have rewritten basically the code and how it's done. We mix statistics and we mix research in our labs. We don't teach them separately. So you're kind of doing research and you're learning about it. It's really practical from year one. We also look at social, so individual behavior is seriously impacted by the presence of others. And like you were saying about technology, it's changing how we're communicating. So social context, timing, that's all really important. So those are like the big pillars, the big areas of psychology. Elective wise, I mean, if you really love the brain, we have these kind of neuroscience specialisms, psychopharmacology. If you really like, so some of the kind of applied social, we have like in criminal psychology, so kind of that kind of forensic area. I do an elective, it's psychology of self-control, but it's really about understanding, kind of situating, giving power back to the person and how they can really impact their own behavior. So there are lots of different specialisms over years 3 and 4, and we're growing them. I see Cathal nodding as well. We kind of respond to where we anticipate the future. Like it really is DCU futures. So where's the future space for our graduates? So we have really deep connections with community, with stakeholders, that internship. So we're constantly, like, as you can see, developing new portfolios, but also our specialisms really reflect our strengths, like in our team and our growing team as well.
Absolutely.
Just to come back in there. Sorry, so just to come back in there, because I just was thinking about a module that I teach as well. We didn't speak up, but there's obviously in the final year, again, Cathal can talk to you about this in a few minutes, but we have, looking at mental health and psychological well-being. And you kind of break it down and you look at maybe things like why things, when people are going through difficult times, what's going on there? And then you look at when things are working, what's going on there, okay? So, and it's obviously all on a sort of somewhat of a spectrum, but you kind of think about things that you might traditionally think about in psychology, like personality or intelligence and individual differences, and then how this happens or occurs, or you can look at it in group settings too. But you know, in your final year, you'll do a course in wellbeing. That's another obviously big area.
Yeah, and I think what's worth noting as well for students who maybe don't know is that psychology in DCU is a science degree. In other universities, you can take more of a humanities approach, but in DCU it is a B.Sc. So you not only are you learning, say, like about humans and everything, but you're taking a look at, say, research methods and statistics and those sort of modules to really analyze the stuff that you're finding out about these humans. So it's a great, if you want that angle of psychology, it's worth noting that, yeah, it's a science degree. Cathal, we might throw the virtual mic over to you for a second, because you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and you're continuing on your research now. Do you want to cast your mind back to when you were applying to DCU? Why DCU? Why psychology?
Thanks, Sinead. Delighted to be here. I think the guys touched on some of the reasons why I chose DCU. The interplacement in third year being a big one. Back in 2015, when I was applying to various institutions, DCU was the only university offering an interplacement for psychology. So that was a massive plus for DCU to get that practical experience in third year. So, you know, you're sitting in the classroom for 2 years learning all the theory, and then you get to apply it in a setting in third year, whether it be a clinical setting or a, you know, sports psychology or organizational psychology in the business setting or educational in the school setting. So yeah, that was one of the big reasons. Probably close to that was the small class size. I think it's very important for me personally speaking. There's an intake of roughly 40 students every year on the B.Sc in psychology. There's usually about 10% of that set aside for mature students. So you've got 4 or 5 mature students and we'll say 34, 35 school leavers. So it's a nice mix. Everybody really, really gels well together. But that smallest class size leads to you getting to know your lecturers and your lecturers getting to know you really, really well, which is very, very important. If for any reason you're struggling a little bit, you know, with CAs and exams coming up at Christmas time and in the summertime, because university really is so different to secondary school. You know, it's more self-learning, it's more self-teaching. You are guided every step of the way, and being able to have that rapport with the staff, I think for me was fantastic. And it was like first name basis from about week 2 or 3. So you're not like, you know, professor this or doctor that, you're calling people by their first name, which gives a lovely kind of familial feel to the degree. So yeah, those two, the class size and the inter-work placement, for me were one of the main reasons why I chose DCU.
That's great, and you've been such an asset to the university. I saw recently on LinkedIn you're officially published now with some of your research, which is incredible. Cathal, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was the final year project that the guys touched on. So in fourth year, you get to do your own research project. Now, I've done a little bit of research probably across all the years. So there's a numerous opportunities for you to dip your toe in research across your 4 years of your degree, with various studentships and stuff in the summertime. But in your fourth year, a major part of your fourth year in the B.Sc in psychology is your own research project. So it's something that you really, really want to do. You get to pick, you know, an area of psychology you may wish to work in, be it, you know, educational psychology or business psychology or whatever the case would be, cognition or whatever. And you get to research that yourself, whether it's, you know, surveys or, you know, interviewing people or whatever. And then you write up your report, and then that's what I got published there recently. So yeah, in a short space of 4 or 5 years, I've gone from working on a building site to being a published author, which is kind of hard to believe sometimes.
That's incredible. And Cathal, and maybe our academics might step in here in a minute, but so you kind of pursued the research path after you graduated. What did some of your classmates pursue? You know, say there's about 40 in the group. Did some people go directly into work? Did some continue on to research? Just a couple of examples if you had any.
Yeah, that's a very good question today, because I get asked this a lot. As a student or master, I used to get asked a lot, what do you do after your degree? You know, what kind of jobs can you get? Like, I mean, there's numerous jobs. Everything in life involves psychology. So like you can go straight to work like in HR or marketing, like in the business side of things. There's also like lots of work in social care, and then some of the class went on to research. So I'd say in my cohort, we have a nice mix of people who went on to do masters and then PhDs, and then you have other people who went straight into employment in various sectors of society. Yeah.
And you have enough time to explore that, I suppose, within the 4 years. And as our academics have mentioned, there are some modules that are optional. So you can try things out. Oh, I didn't like that too much. Actually, I'm really fond of this, and kind of make that decision then for going forward. And for Lorraine and Brian, any graduates that you call to mind that have gone on to do anything of note that you think would be interesting for our students to hear?
Well, just one that I've worked with through DCU has gone on now. She actually went out into a postgraduate program into like a big multinational, then decided that kind of wasn't for her, came back and ended up working in a technology. Well, I would say it's beyond a startup, right? So it's a company that's really growing, maybe to 50 people, but she's in there as the kind of she's doing her master's now. So she's had her undergraduate, but she's in there kind of leading the charge and it's a well-being platform and some of the technology there. And I'm working back with her now. That's really exciting. It's totally different. And the world in that space is growing. So like Lorraine can talk to you more about this area, disruptive tech. It's huge. So there's lots of opportunities, and it's just basically the environment is changing for where psychology graduates can go. As Carl touched on, psychology is in everything. And the fact is, because it's a B.Sc, you get a scientific approach to understanding information, understanding about people, and that marries really well. If you're a graduate and you come out, you're going to be very well sought after, because psychology gives you a background in communication, gives you a background in discussing complex things in lay terms. It gives you a background in structuring information, being systematic about your thought. So you've got the fundamentals to be a great graduate in terms of employment. That's what I would say. And there's lots of examples, but that just comes to mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sinead, I'm just thinking, like, I mean, Brian, like some of our past students now are our colleagues. That speaks volumes, right? So, so they're a doctor, and they're working with us. I think, and it's so lovely to see that progression. And I think, like what Cathal said, I mean, there is, and I think it's important when you're sitting here at this virtual meeting, but to think about what the fit is for you. But I think that, the personal tutor focus from basically day one, the kind of small class sizes, and we work really, really hard to maintain that as we grow. That's a challenge always, but that is at the forefront. And also those opportunities so that you can link in, you can network even through your 4 years with the team's kind of broader research and other kind of partners, to create all these other opportunities. And we do see that people come back. And as I said, they are our colleagues now, so they're giving back even more and making it even richer. But yeah, past graduates have gone into, of course, like clinical training, for example, which is incredibly competitive. And most people say that's where they want to go at the beginning. And what's really nice is to see that the 4 years really exposes everyone to these so many options, so that almost it can be difficult to make the decision. And that's good as well, because there is a lot of choice. So that's step 2 after your 4 years, especially from the perspective of professional psychology. All those pathways are open, like you mentioned, organizational, educational, sport, if you want to go into more forensic criminal justice, or the clinical counseling, or you want to work in neuropsychology, all of these specialisms. We've kind of thought really deeply about how we map exposure to that in our electives, and you going forward, you progressing.
Yeah, Lorraine, do you mind if I ask you another question about that? Because you're right, a lot of students say to us, I want to become a psychologist, or I want to become a counsellor. Could you kind of very zoomed out, what's that map like? Okay, if they enter DCU, they study 4 years in psychology. What are the next steps if they do want to go on to that area?
Yeah, so the step 1, so with us, and we do step 2 as well, so we can talk about our postgraduate, but our step 1 is pre-professional. So step 2 is professional. So typically, if you're talking about counselling or clinical, it's doctorate level. So you're talking about 3+ years postgraduate, and it's competitive, so you need experience. So what do we do that others don't? Well, you get a little bit of experience already pre-professionally. So you get to shadow, you get to experience potentially in a hospital and shadow a clinical psychologist who works with maybe brain injury patients, or in a clinical setting. So you're already getting some of the practical, experience and observation. But then the next step would be to get maybe that research assistant position, or get that assistant position, be competitive with your skill set, your experience, and then the step 2, the professional training. So for many areas, it's doctorate. So the benchmark, of course, has moved, and that makes sense. For others, it's masters. So, you know, from organizational psychology, sports, it would be, say, the 1+ year postgraduate.
Thanks, Lorraine, because as a 6th-year or even younger, maybe, it's hard to know what lies beyond university, and especially if you do need to do additional study or research. And thank you for mapping that out. I hope that was helpful to anyone who is considering going down that route. And we have a question that's come in, Lorraine, maybe for you, but anyone can hop in. So for our new courses, psychology and maths and psychology and disruptive technologies, someone has asked how many psychology topics would kind of be dropped, say, to make room for the maths and the disruptive technology modules?
So that's a good question. And it's not in terms of dropping, it's how we build onto the core. So the psychology, and we take the core that's required for accreditation. So that's the pre-professional accreditation. And where so if we call it the single honors or the flagship degree, there are lots of different specialisms in psychology. For the math and for the disruptive tech, the specialisms are the integrated areas. Does that make sense? So it's kind of growing, it's adding on. So it's not that you're missing out on areas of psychology, you cover all the core areas, but that you have for the newer degrees within our portfolio a focus on these specific areas or specialisms. So from that perspective, that's how we build and design our degrees.
And Lorraine, in the coming months, will there be kind of module descriptions for our new courses so that maybe someone could sit there and compare and contrast to see which course would suit them best?
So we will. So right now, every new degree goes through an accreditation process. So that's like our review process. So right now we're on track. That's the normal process. So we don't release any until we get like accreditation. So right now we're going through the process. But yes, that, you know, we would generally have the information like you would, you know, when you go through, say, DCU, the website, we would outlink to the structure and then brief descriptions. But, you know, we're always here as well to take questions. So you can email us. Or, you know, like these sessions are really, really good so that we can talk about the program and give a flavor. So there are lots of opportunities to get that information. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question come in. Cathal, it looks like you've planted someone in the audience here with this question because you entered as a mature student as well. Someone has asked, I have my mature student interview tomorrow morning with DCU Psychology. Any advice that you might have?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, first of all, best of luck with the interview tomorrow. And in my experience, it actually shouldn't be called an interview. It's probably against the Trade Description Act because it's more of a friendly chat. I found that with some other institutions, your stereotypical view of an interview was like an interview, whereas with the DCU, it was more of a, as I said, a friendly chat. And yeah, just try and not get too anxious and just try and sell yourself. And, you know, that's the best advice I can give. Maybe have a little bit of homework done. If you know who's interviewing you, maybe have a little bit of homework done on, you know, their specialist areas in psychology. And yeah, just try and relax into it. And you're not going to be grilled or tortured in any way. It's just like a friendly chat. But try and use that 5 or 10 minutes or whatever it is to, you know, to sell yourself and really try and explain why you want to study psychology and what sort of a fit you will be with the school, what you're going to bring to the School of Psychology, as opposed to what the school is going to give to you, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great advice, Colin, and you've been through it yourself and you've been successful, so that's invaluable advice. Thank you very much. A couple more questions coming in for the panel. We might cover, so someone asked, what other careers could I have with the B.Sc in psychology? So I know myself, speaking with a lot of students, it's often job titles are what they think about when it comes to sort of jobs. So maybe someone entered a little bit later because we chatted about this a little bit earlier, but maybe Brian and Lorraine could hop in again with maybe some job titles of people who do a B.Sc in psychology.
Well, I know that for many, and I know Brian, you probably want to jump in on this as well, but we talked about our research skill set. So this is on the kind of the flagship program, so not going deep into math or anything programming like that. Many of our graduates work in data visualization, data analysis. So their roles would be within research, kind of research officer type R&D units within companies, including marketing, including, so at that level, research kind of assistant, associate type work as well. For many, and sometimes internships offer that solution for the next job. We've had situations where our students, after their 4th year, return to the employer because they've done such an amazing work that they've made that great connection. So they would continue, and that could be in any type of community NGO, or it could be a private clinic, for example. So there are lots of it's so varied, which is very good. That's what you need to see in a market, in a flexible market, any employment market.
Exactly. And I know students who maybe are only going to enter DCU, say next year, by the time you graduate, they predict you could have between 12 and 15 different jobs in your lifetime. So I wouldn't even worry too much about what job am I going to do forever. You'll probably move around quite a bit. And what's very important, and I know an emphasis with DCU Futures, are transversal skills. So skills that you can learn in a course that can actually apply in various different work settings. We have lots of questions coming in. We've got the ball rolling, which is fantastic. Someone has asked, if you don't get your preferred B.Sc course, but still want to study psychology in college, what would you advise as a backup route or a different entry, to put on their CAO?
From DCU perspective?
Yeah.
So one thing that I can say, so from DCU perspective, we have, say, traditional, so direct entry CAO, and non-traditional, of course, routes, but we also designed, so it may not be something obviously that you would activate or trigger right now, but we have a master's in conversion, and the thinking, and I was behind the design of that at the time, was that if you, for example, couldn't achieve the points, let's say, for psychology, but you achieved points for a degree, and it could be in psychological science, so it could be somewhere else. You do 3 years, but you cover a certain amount of psychology, a certain amount of research. You could satisfy the entry criteria for a 1 year. So this would be almost like the 4th year, a 1 year intensive master's conversion in psychology. And we have our graduates who are going through that process right now. And it's not necessarily for people who couldn't do psychology, of course, in the first place. Lots of people have different careers and they think, you know what, I'd like to convert to psychology. So we have lots of people who've had really successful careers and they use it. But that's a mechanism. So if you did another type of degree, we have that conversion masters, so 1 year.
Great, thank you. That's great insight to know. Another couple of questions. Okay, someone has asked, can you become an author through psychology? Would other people read your work, or is it in the school only? I'm not sure if this is strictly related to academic writing or fiction and non-fiction. I'm not sure. Cathal, I know you have your work published now. I don't know if you can attest anything to that in terms of who can read your work. It's not. Yeah,
well, obviously the work I just got published, and I mean the Brian and Lorraine have way more publications than I have, but it was published in an academic journal, so it's geared towards an academic audience. But of course, lay people can. I would hope that lay people will read it as well, given the subject matter. For example, it's in the area of young onset dementia, so anybody who is living with that condition or family members more than happy can read it as well. But yeah, and there's no reason why I couldn't write a novel or a book if I really, really wanted it, and not publish it in an academic journal, publish it somewhere else. So yeah, you could, the world's your oyster. You can write what you want and try and get it published,
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Cathal. Brian, you might be able to hop in here. Someone has asked about a module, and I haven't heard of it myself, but someone's wondering what is taught in the optional talent module.
Optional talent module.
Is that a thing?
I actually would defer to Lorraine if she can answer that. I'm not actually sure. Optional. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on
Okay,
that one.
that's okay. We might come back to that when
Yeah.
Lorraine is back. Just a comment that someone has added is someone said that they had their mature student interview this morning and was made feel at ease, which was very much appreciated. So hopefully that's exciting for the person who has their interview tomorrow. He'll be at ease, which is nice. Actually, Brian, this one we might be able to swing over to you. In terms of entry requirements, someone's wondering, do I need a high level of science like biology or maths to enter this course?
So no, you need certain requirements. So basically the points are usually around about 500 for the straight psychology. And in terms of entry, I don't think you actually need, I just think you need to meet the points. You don't need any specifics like scientific disciplines in there. Carl, you're going to jump in there on.
Yeah, no, with the B.Sc, you need at least an ordinary level 4 or H6 maths for the B.Sc, and then obviously get the required level of points. But just to say, do you need a background in maths or biology? I didn't do biology for my leaving cert, and I wouldn't have been no Einstein at maths. So don't let that put you off, because you are guided. I know sometimes I get asked about the kind of statistical element of the degree, and that kind of can put people off. But if you can work a calculator, you'll get through the degree, basically.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Carl. And we might stick with you again, Carl, just for relating to what you just said. Entering as a first year, if you've never done psychology before, which most first years haven't, and what sort of supports are available there to kind of help you through and to get to terms with all these new subjects?
Yeah, well, the supports, like, first of all, the supports come from the staff within the school. So you have a module coordinator, or for want of a better word, a teacher for every subject or every module, and they'd be your first port of call if you're struggling. Then you have a kind of like a year tutor as well. Each year would have their own year tutor. Then you have the program chair who you can approach as well. But then in coming out of the School of Psychology, you also have fantastic supports with student support and development, which is just over in the Henry Grattan building in Glasnevin. For anybody who doesn't know, it's not a massive campus. You walk around in 10 minutes. So if you feel maybe you are unable to approach, which I can't imagine happening, but if you feel you are unable to approach anybody in the psychology team, there are wider supports then available to all students on campus through student support and development. But my first port of call would always be with the module coordinator, the teachers that's going to be teaching you, and they are so approachable, it's unbelievable. So there shouldn't be any issues there.
That's lovely to hear that there's such welcome support available for the students. Maybe Brian and Lorraine will be able to hop in here. Is there a sports psychology module? I think there might be.
So in apologies for that, I had to, my little kid was doing Zoom gymnastics and something went wrong. So I just thought it was good. So my apologies. I think we're all good, although we could hear some weird noises. So in year 2, there is a sport. So that's with health and human performance. So we work very closely with a lot of psychologists who are across other schools. And I know that, even some of the work that I do myself, that there are lots of research and other options to explore exercise sport psychology as well throughout the degree.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Lorraine, this question came in when you were gone and it stumped us a little bit because we weren't sure what this module is. Someone asked what is taught in the optional talent module. Does that ring any bells?
I will have to check that, Sinead.
That's okay.
I know that there's an Unin module, so unless that is, but no, I need to check that. So
that's no problem. For the person who wrote in, if you can send us maybe the link or something, and we'd be able to clarify.
The link, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, or maybe where you read it. You've got one up on us there. So
I'm trying to look it up now. I'm trying to figure it out.
It could be under a different name. Could be under a different name or something along those lines. But as we start to wrap up, if anyone wants to get in any final questions, please do work away. I like to kind of end to focus on maybe a tip or a trick for incoming students. If we've sold them on psychology now in DCU, any advice, be it as a student or a lecturer, that you think would be useful upon entry into DCU?
I don't know, Brian, if you want to jump in, just
I was just going to say, Yeah. I'm just going to say, enter with an open mind. I think Cathal touched on something really important there, which is about the statistics and the research side of things. And because it's a science degree, sometimes you might come in and get a little bit overwhelmed. And sometimes you might come into psychology and think it's all about maybe becoming a clinical psychologist. But it's quite broad, it's quite varied, and you'll always find something of interest. And I think if you find something of interest, run with it, because you can take it right the way up until your final year project and do something in an area that you really love. And a lot of other degrees and a lot of other professions, or where you go, you can't really do that. So that's what I think. Enter with an open mind, do the best that you can. You'll really enjoy the journey.
Thank you. Cathal, anything from a student perspective, what you've learned, and what would you pass on?
Yeah, I think Brian's after hitting the nail on the head there, basically, because when I entered with a relatively open mind, but kind of maybe leaning towards sports psychology. I kind of had my heart set on sports psychology, and within a couple of weeks, it was, oh my God, there's so much else available here. And then through a student internship over one summer at the end of first year, I went down the road of cognition and neurodegenerative diseases and stuff, and that a whole different path. Do you know what I mean? And never look back. So I think the way the degree is structured, over the first year or two, that you kind of dip your toe in every core aspect of psychology, so that when you get to the end of second year or halfway through second year, you would more than likely be going in a different direction than you maybe thought you were going to go when you walked in the first day in September. So yeah, just keep the mind open and just absorb all the experiences and don't be afraid to put your hand up. There's so many opportunities to avail of, so just grab them and run with it.
Exactly, and your time will fly. I can guarantee that over the 4 years. So enjoy every minute. Lorraine, anything to add there?
I mean, I totally agree with Brian and Cathal about being open. When I studied psychology, I actually started off in law, but ended up in the theatres and the psychology lectures, and I was like, okay, there's something going on here. Why am I always creeping over to psychology? I think there is something about studying psychology. There is that ability just to immerse yourself in the curious. I would say be open, not only avail of opportunities, but be brave enough to create them as well. Like, come up with your ideas, because we have that culture. We are open. Our virtual doors are open, and we give that time. Even when we're pressed for time, we give the time, and you never know what connection, what that can spark off. I mean, like Cathal, like you said, you availed of those early internships. Look where you are right now. And you might not have come on day one thinking, I am going to be working in neuropsych, and that's what I love about it. That was the same with my experience, and we mirror that. I thought I was going to go in a particular area of psychology, and it just, let it play out, but also be the author of what you want it to be as well.
Thank you, Lorraine. One final question that's come in before we let everyone go and enjoy the sun. And it's a great question. Is there a lot of essay work and reading involved in this course? And I'd imagine that's Cathal laughing. I think that's a yes then.
Well, I mean, let's call a spade here. You're not going to be handed a degree. Like, you have to be willing to work for it. And I'm sure that's the same with any degree course you decide to take on, across any university. So yes, there is a various mix of essays and a various mix of presentations, and then there's exams. So yeah, there is work involved. But what I will say is, it doesn't, it's not that you're going to be snowed under a work that it interferes with other aspects of your life. You still have plenty of time, to be involved in sport or meet your friends or your family life. So it doesn't become all consuming. But the degree isn't handed out like confetti. You have to be able to willing to put the work in. So yeah, there is a various range of essays and exams and stuff across the 4 years. Yeah.
And if I can jump in from the DCU Future, Sinead, one of the kind of the bold things about the new programs is that the how we're doing it is differently. So we are going to be assessing in very different ways. So yeah, that there can be, of course, the essay, but we're looking at ways like hackathons, and we already kind of piloted that earlier this year. So we get students from lots of different types of degrees to work together to hack a solution for a big social question. So we're looking at, there are lots of different types of assessments. So there, of course, the more traditional where it's it's absolutely appropriate, but we also have lots of other types of assessments. But I do agree, for anything to gain that, like to level up in your knowledge, to level up in your skills, you have to be brave to get in there, just get stuck in. And it's not just reading, we do lots of interactive type lectures, seminars. I mean, Cathal teaches on and demonstrates on the program as well. So we have, you know, we also have PhD students who are very close to, you know, their journey of where they have come from, you know, in terms of being an undergrad, but also they're leveling up now in their research. And there's that really nice connection, because you also anticipate what the students are thinking. You're very close to the material and you teach it in your way as well. So we make it our own. So I would think just be open to all those experience and you'll definitely get your fit. Yeah.
And I just to come in there as too, you know, the one thing, I'm just going back to the idea that psychology can be broad, but and find something that you're interested in, run with it. Like one week your assignment could be on something to do with vision, you know, understanding the eye, and the next week you're doing an assignment on how do employees engage with certain well-being, you know, things, well-being platforms, whatever that might be, or it could be on memory. So it's so broad that, you know, one day you might think, right, this isn't for me, but the next one you really get into it, and all of a sudden that essay or that whatever it is doesn't become too laborious. And that's the thing about psychology, I guess. You get the tools to kind of be very good at applying it into different areas. So assignments, some like everything, there could be chores, but there's some of them that you're going to get stuck into. You're going to really enjoy it because you'll find something that you like.
Exactly. And I would just add to everything that was mentioned, you know, as Cathal said, there are supports available, not only directly from lecturers and you know, research assistants, but also we have a maths learning centre in DCU, for example, which is an office that runs in the library, and it's a free service, completely free for students, where you can go and get help with your maths problems. So there's people who work there every day, well, Monday to Friday probably, and who are able to help you with your queries. Not only do we have a maths centre, we have a writing center as well. So if you're finding, say, essay writing intimidating, because it's slightly different from Leaving Cert essay writing, you have to reference, you know, anything you're putting in your essay. There's supports available, again, free of charge. You go and someone can help you through it, make sure you're referencing everything correctly, finding proper sources. You know, you're not thrown in the deep end. You know, all these tools and offices are there to help you through, as I said, and speaking with your lecturers directly. There's no more questions coming in. I think we have done a fantastic job on our panelists in answering everything that's come through. If you're watching this back on the recording, you can of course get in contact with us through studenthelp@dcu.ie, which is the email address you would have received this link from today. And if you have any specific questions for our panelists, I can forward them on, and when they find the time, I'm sure they'd be able to get back to you. But best of luck to everyone, whether you're doing your interview tomorrow, if you've just done it today, or if you are considering DCU for your CAO. We are here for the next couple of weeks and months if you do want to clarify anything or just get a final. Oh, we've one final question come in. Oh, someone's saying thank you all for the great information, and I echo that thanks as well. It's fantastic to get our panelists on after hours, technically, from work. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much for coming along today. We'll be back next week with an episode to do with languages. So maybe if you are considering studying a language degree in DCU, you might want to come along and see that webinar as well. But a huge thank you again to our panelists for such a great discussion. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.